Breaking news. Zelensky asserts that while time may be on his side, real time is not. Western media have constructed and steadfastly adhered to a series of narratives since the Russia-Ukraine war began more than 20 months ago. War hero and resistance leader Volodymyr Zelensky is often compared to Winston Churchill. While Russians avoid conscription, many Ukrainians are eager to join the war effort. The only thing the Ukrainians need to retake the territory Russia has annexed is more money and weapons. Instead of calling for a ceasefire and negotiating a settlement, the West's interests lie in assisting them in achieving that grand victory. Contrary evidence, such as the fact that Ukraine has been suffering unsustainable losses in combat and that we have not been able to adequately supply them with artillery shells, as well as the fact that the billions we have been sending to Ukraine have fallen victim to corruption, has been labeled Putin talking points. Those who raise these concerns are labeled as apologists for the Kremlin. For these reasons and more, Time's cover story this week was truly remarkable. The article is ostensibly another hagiography of Zelensky as the heroic figure forced to go it alone as times get tough and Western allies start to abandon him. Written by Simon Schuster, who previously wrote the article naming Zelensky Times Person of the Year at the end of 2022. Zelensky's reputation in the West takes a hit, but many of the claims made by so-called apologists for Putin are vindicated. Now, however, these complaints are coming from within the presidential palace itself, from Zelensky's own advisors and aides. Our media's carefully constructed fiction about the situation in Ukraine appears to be collapsing, allowing the truth to flood out. Ukraine's war objectives are not feasible. Kyiv has insisted for a long time that all it takes is Western arms and money to achieve its definition of victory, which is the retaking of all Ukrainian territory, including Crimea. Now, after a disastrous summer counteroffensive that cost the Ukrainians dearly in lives while regaining almost no territory, Zelensky's advisors are questioning whether or not those goals are even achievable. However, Schuster claims that Zelensky's faith in ultimate victory over Russia has hardened into a form that worries some of his advisors, and that this faith is immovable, verging on the messianic. Schuster is told by one of Zelensky's closest associates, he is delusional. "We have no other choice. We're losing this battle, but you should try to tell him that." This, of course, contradicts the Ukrainian government's official narrative that has been repeated by Western news outlets. The only person who continues to believe Zelensky's press clippings is Zelensky himself. The Ukrainian army has been utterly annihilated by the shocking loss of life. Throughout the war, Ukraine has refused to reveal casualty counts, instead dismissing reports of hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian casualties as Russian propaganda, despite mounting evidence to the contrary. Schuster hears from another of Zelensky's close associates that the casualties are so high that, even if the US and its allies come through with all the weapons they have pledged, we don't have the men to use them. It has been reported by Schuster that, in some branches of the military, the shortage of personnel has become even more dire than the deficit in arms and ammunition. The average age of a serving Ukrainian soldier is 43, and rising, as stated in the article. It would appear that the young people have been sacrificed already. Military draft policies are extremely harsh. Yet another reality brushed aside as a Putin talking point is the fact that the Ukrainians have had to implement increasingly harsh conscription policies in order to bolster their military. In an unsettling assessment, Schuster states, new recruitment is way down. Draft officers reportedly have been pulling men off trains and buses and sending them to the front as conscription efforts have ramped up across the country. It is not uncommon for the wealthy to bribe their way out of military service, usually by purchasing a medical exemption. In August, when widespread corruption threatened to derail recruitment efforts, Zelensky took drastic action by dismissing the directors of all regional draft offices. Morale is collapsing. Even patriots don't want to die serving as cannon fodder for a doomed military strategy. There is growing discord among the officers, and it is getting dangerously close to mutiny. One close Zelensky aide complained to Schuster that some frontline commanders have begun refusing orders to advance even when they come directly from the office of the president. When Schuster inquired about these concerns with a senior military officer, the officer explained that some officers must refuse impossible orders. He related how in early October, they were given the order to retake the city of Horlivka, a strategic outpost in eastern Ukraine that has been under Russian control for nearly a decade. When asked a question, the answer came in the form of a question, Shuster writes. As in, with what? Zelensky's plans to eliminate Russian control over all of Ukraine are doomed by a lack of manpower and heavy weaponry. He'll have to waste Ukrainian lives fighting until there's no one left to fight, and that number is steadily declining. There is no stopping corruption. Corruption in the Ukrainian government has been a Putin talking point for a long time. US and NATO allies have been on Zelensky's case about this very issue. They don't want to see their billions of dollars in aid go to corrupt officials' pockets. Zelensky has taken some measures, such as dismissing Oleksiy Reznikov from his position as Minister of Defense due to corruption in defense procurement. But Zelensky will have to fire most of his government to eradicate corruption completely. After Shuster had turned off his recording device, a senior presidential advisor told him, "People are stealing like there is no tomorrow." Taimin used a quote from Zelensky, "Nobody believes in our victory like I do," as the headline for his article. Since it appears that his advisors no longer support Ukraine's war strategy or Zelensky's leadership of it, he may need to read Schuster's piece to realize how right he is. Zelensky no doubt intended the quote as a Churchillian, never surrender, exhortation to courage and resolve in the face of Ukraine's darkest hour, rather than as an admission of delusional optimism. It's concerning that he seems to have lost touch with reality, as evidenced by his insistence on total victory and his refusal to consider peace negotiations. To be sure, Zelensky is not alone in his refusal to face reality. Despite already allocating over $100 billion to Ukraine's war effort, the Biden administration has proposed allocating an additional $61 billion. Zelensky's confidence was no doubt bolstered by Biden's assurances of full support for, as long as it takes. But it's becoming clear that the United States can't keep that promise indefinitely. Too many other international obligations, such as those to Israel, drain its already stretched resources. Zelensky is the only one of his team who can't seem to grasp the new reality. The fact that his inner circle is the source of the torrent of revelations and complaints suggests that his unwavering immovability owes less to Churchillian resolve and more to an impregnable bunker mentality, despite Shuster and Time's best efforts to portray him as the last stalwart of the Ukrainian cause.